Ah yes, the CIA, a well-respected, very above-board group that would never do anything shady. Oh boy. Today I'm going to be covering the CIA Iceberg, something that I found on a subreddit that I can neither say the name of or show the profile picture for without getting demonetized, and that's how you know this is going to be good. This thing is long. Okay, it's massive. Gargantuan, even. It's almost as big as your mother, some might say. I mean, I would never say that, don't get me wrong, okay? Your mom is way bigger than this thing, it's not even close, but some might just say. Because of its size, this iceberg, much like the legs of somebody in a CIA black site, is going to be broken up into a few different parts. And I'm, fully blacked out right now. This isn't my normal setup, but, I felt, secret and whatnot. You may notice some of the entries on here are in dark green while others are in neon green. Okay, that's an important distinction. All the entries in dark green are situations that the CIA has been confirmed to be involved in without a doubt. And the creator says everything in neon green is stuff that they were probably involved in. Got it? You get it? That's good. Let's go. Thanks to Reddit user Cormero for creating this image, and without further ado, bust out your neuralizer and protect your bunghole because we're about to dive deep into the disturbing CIA iceberg. Okay, so the first tier is all in dark green, so the CIA has been confirmed, without a doubt, to be involved in everything that's going to be in this tier, which makes some of them just so much more terrifying. I mean, some of the, theories are pretty disturbing, sure, but, dude, some of the stuff that it's confirmed that they've done is still just wow. Just stick with it, because, researching this thing, I was constantly just holy shit, they actually do that? Let's get into it. Air America. It makes sense that this is the first entry because there's an entire Mel Gibson movie named after it. And no, I did not watch it, but, I assume it's mid. Air America was a passenger and cargo airline founded in China in 1946 and secretly purchased by the CIA in 1950. Its main role was to conduct search and rescue, covert operations, and just all kinds of shady shit in Southeast Asia from 1950 to 1976. They flew out of bases in Cambodia, Thailand, Taiwan, Japan, Vietnam, especially during the war, and flew a couple of top-secret missions into Burma and the People's Republic of China. But for reasons we'll get into in a second, their main baby mama was the Kingdom of Laos, a country which I apparently can never spell correctly even though it's literally just 4 letters.
So are you Chinese or Japanese?
We Laotian.
So are you Chinese or Japanese?
Air America flew all types of fellas all over Southeast Asia, including civilians, diplomats, war casualties, doctors, sabotage teams, refugees, commandos, our old friend Richard Nixon, and even drug enforcement officers, which is very ironic. Their slogan was anything, anywhere, anytime, professionally. And when they say anything, they mean anything. I mean, they weren't flying elephants and trombones all over the place, but you ask them to fly drugs? They're on it like Kevin Spacey on a sex offender list, bro. They are on that shit. Them drugs are getting trafficked, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, bucko, okay? Line them up and snort them down. The CIA has got you covered. And their favorite butt buddy, Laos, started asking. Basically what happened was, the Laotian Air Force was trafficking opium and heroin to help pay for their war, and the main airstrip that they were using to do so, at a place called the Plain of Jars, was taken over by Laotian rebels aligned with the communist North Vietnamese in 1964. And whenever the CIA hears the word communist, their brain starts dumping concepts of things like the law and basic morality in order to create steam, which then comes out of their tiny little ears. It's pretty adorable, honestly. Mention that communism is a better economic model next time you see a CIA agent. They'll start sounding like a tea kettle in 5 seconds. Although generally, if you actually see a CIA agent, you're about 5 seconds away from getting gagged, kidnapped, or shot. So just, speak quickly. Anyway, the capture of this airstrip was important because the Laotian Air Force didn't have any Chad-tier aircraft that could land at places like dirt airstrips or no airstrips at all, like something like a helicopter could, and that's where the CIA stepped in. You see, Air America had all kinds of special planes and helicopters that could land anywhere you want, dirt, trees, your mom's house, wherever the hell you can think of. And the CIA was more than happy to help if it meant more money going to people fighting the dirty commies. And, hey, why not skim a little bit of the profits off for the old black budget while you're at it, huh? I mean, come on, Daddy needs a new pair of 9mm CX4 pistol caliber semi-automatic carbine-rated long-range Berettas, okay? How is he supposed to pay for those without some Laotian drug money, huh? Don't be a bitch. There's no hard evidence of any of this Laotian drug money going directly into the CIA's coffers, but there is tons of evidence of the CIA CIA owned and operated Air America, transporting these Laotian drugs just all over the place. So I really don't think it's that much of a stretch. The Disposition Matrix. Okay, second entry in it, and this is the start of stuff getting dark already. So, buckle up. The Disposition Matrix is CIA speak for what U.S. officials have described as a next-generation capture-kill list. Interesting word choice, U.S. government. It's the PS5 of kill lists, apparently. Created during the Obama administration in 2010, the Matrix was pioneered by former CIA Director John Brennan, who seems like just a swell guy, and definitely not a shadowy reptilian living inside the skin peeled off of the rotting corpse of Hank Schrader. The Matrix database collects the backgrounds, locations, associations, and affiliations of those on the list, as well as developing strategies for finding, capturing, or killing them, or subjecting them to extraordinary rendition, which is some more CIA speak that basically translates to government-sponsored kidnapping. It's fun stuff. It's very lighthearted stuff for this family-friendly Iceberg video. The process for determining who goes on this list is classified, and the main method used for carrying out these hits seems to be drone strikes, mostly in the Middle East and East Africa. But that doesn't mean they don't snuff out American citizens too, though. This is the CIA we're talking about here, of course. All right, this is the first of several names that I'm not going to pronounce correctly. But Anwar al-Awlaki, an American citizen and terror suspect who was killed by a drone strike in 2011, is a good example. President Obama, who really took all the drone stuff in this country to the next level during his presidency, described the killing as an easy decision. The Disposition Matrix is controversial for a lot of reasons, obviously, but a big one is because, like a few fun things that the CIA likes doing, it basically takes these things we have called human rights and says, what are those? Never heard of those before. Basically, if your name has found itself in the unfortunate position of being on this list, your right to a fair trial by a jury of your peers before being sentenced to death is now non-existent. The list of targets is updated every 3 months by the CIA and 2 other agencies, and then passed on to zombified Hank Schrader, John Brennan, and the vice president for approval. But that's not all it takes to legally murder somebody with no due process from the judicial system, right? That's crazy. Well, that's true. The president has to say it's okay too. So, there's that. No trial for your crimes or anything, but hey, the president said you can die, so, what are you gonna do about that? Except if the target is in Pakistan for some reason, then you don't even need the president to say it's fine. Apparently the CIA is allowed to do just whatever the it wants in Pakistan for some reason. Big boy shit going down in Pakistan, I guess. The rules of the list also allow the CIA to kill people that they don't even know the names or identities of, so long as those people are, quote, thought to be engaged in certain activities, such as loading a vehicle full of explosives. Which is ridiculous. I put 1 bomb in my car on the way to shit on the floor of a Target, and suddenly Stan Smith has a Glock to my forehead. While the U.S. government claims that the amount of civilians killed in these drone strikes that this list is responsible for causing is in the single digits, that is, well, just a straight-up lie, obviously. The government gets away with saying this ridiculously low number because they classify all military-aged males in a strike zone as non-civilian combatants, regardless of any actual militant affiliation. So they're basically only counting the women, children, and elderly civilians that they oopsie-daisy murder during these drone strikes, and even with that system of death accounting, their numbers are still wrong. The government lying about killing civilians, huh? Who would have thunk it? Who would have thought they'd do that? The actual numbers, according to a Bureau of Investigative Journalism report, show that between 2004 and 2012, CIA-directed drone strikes killed between 475 and 885 civilians in Pakistan alone, 176 of which being children, and injured an additional 1,250 or more. Family-friendly fun time CIA Iceberg here, folks. Castro assassination attempts. On a more lighthearted note, well, as lighthearted as you can get when you're talking about a shady government organization trying to murder somebody, let's talk about Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro was the dictator of Cuba from 1959 to 2008, and during that time survived over 50 assassination attempts. A pretty ridiculous number there, right? It's even more ridiculous when you account for the fact that I'm lying, and it was actually more than 600 assassination attempts, most of which being conducted by, you guessed it, the CIA. Castro is estimated to have made it through 634 attempts on his life, which is insane. I mean, that's like surviving somebody trying to kill you every single day for almost 2 years. Brutal communist dictator, sure. But brutal communist death-dodging Giga Chad? I think that that's also a pretty fair title for this guy. Pretty solid beard, too. Look at that thing, immaculate. Obviously, I don't have time to go over more than 600 different assassination attempts, nor do we actually know the specifics of what all of them are publicly. So I will just stick to the most ridiculous Wile E. Coyote tier schemes that the CIA had to kill this guy. There's the time they dipped his cigars in poison strong enough to kill anyone who put them in their mouths, and then the box of cigars just promptly disappeared. The poison they used was actually botulinum toxin, which is literally just Botox. So sure, he might have been paralyzed before a slow and agonizing death, but he would have looked damn good doing it. My personal theory is the cigars never made it to Castro because Kim Kardashian stole them for her own special stash, and her eyebrows haven't moved since. I mean, have you seen her eyebrows move since 1964? I haven't personally. There's also the time the CIA paid off known American mobsters to poison the dictator's food, which they just then straight up didn't do. They paid the boss of the Chicago crime syndicate, as well as his mob's head of Cuban operations, who were both on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list at the time, mind you, $1.2 million in today's money, multiple separate times for each failed hit, which, again, they just straight up didn't do. And the lesson here is, maybe don't trust known mobsters to carry out covert government operations. Who would have thought that they might steal your money? Castro loved to scuba dive, and the CIA cooked up more than a few ridiculous plots to make him, how you say, swim with the fishes while he was doing it. One was to line the inside of his diving suit with tuberculosis, so it looked like just a natural disease got to him and he would slowly die a la Arthur Morgan. Another was to plant explosives in a large seashell that they would then paint exotic colors and place in a spot that Castro loved to dive in, so he'd just be like, ooh, pretty shell, why don't I give it a little squeeze? And then boom, Cuban fish food. There was also a real James Bond-style plot that they cooked up where they would poison him with a tiny hypodermic needle placed at the tip of a pen. But this plan suffered two major drawbacks, the first being that the Cuban official tasked with delivering the poison in the pen to Castro apparently thought that the whole plan was just stupid as hell, saying that the CIA could, quote, surely come up with something more sophisticated than that. And the other being that he was given the pen on November 22nd, 1963, a day that not much happened on other than the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Cranial oopsie daisy. This event caused the government to, much like the Oregon Medical Group with my $17,000 medical bill after my appendix was taken out right before the pandemic started, just kind of forget about it. Please do not remind them. There were also several attempts on things by the CIA that, while not meant to kill the dictator, were still just fucking hilarious. There was the time in 1960 that the CIA tried to spray a gas similar to LSD into his broadcasting room to make him hallucinate and seem like a gosh darn fool while broadcasting a speech to the Cuban people. There was the time they once again dipped his cigars, this time in a substance meant to have a similar effect to PCP. The government really liked their research chemicals, apparently. And the time they planned to dust his shoes with thallium salts to, and I'm not kidding, make his beard fall out. All of these plots, much like all the other ones, failed miserably. Also, why were they even wasting their time with these? You know, aren't you trying to kill the guy? Why are you wasting valuable man-hours trying to give him babyface and trip sack? Just one of the many reasons I am convinced the CIA smokes the crack that they distribute to the inner cities. Get down, get down. Black sites. Okay, we're back to the incredibly disturbing stuff now. Black sites are secret prisons which hold ghost detainees, which are prisoners that are not registered anywhere and not even officially charged with a crime. And as you can imagine, the CIA just hates these things and would never use them because they're clearly immoral, illegal, and against the Geneva Convention. I'm just kidding, they don't care about any of that shit. They f***ing love these things. The most famous of these black sites is Guantanamo Bay, a US prison in Cuba where prisoners are held with no legal rights. But technically, it's not a secret location, it's a publicly known prison, so it's kind of in a gray area there. It's a gray site, if you will. Obviously, getting the numbers on these things is kind of hard since, you know, they're secret prisons, but based on current information, the CIA is estimated to have more than 95 secret prisons in 28 different countries, as well as 17 ships that operate as floating prisons in international waters. You do not want to find yourself in one of these black sites, okay? It is not a fun time. There are no pizza parties, and even if there were, you could bet your bottom dollar there would be anchovies involved. The main reason the CIA keeps these black sites is so they can perform enhanced interrogation on the people held there. You may have noticed at this point that the CIA basically has their own dialect of English with all these fancy terms that inevitably translate to just awful, terrible things. The Patriot Act? What's that? I love America. Where do I sign? Oh no. Enhanced interrogation is CIA speak for straight-up torture, which they are not shy about inflicting on prisoners in these black sites in order to squeeze out information or force confessions. If you're wondering where they got that brilliant term, it was actually translated from the Nazis. The chief of the Gestapo coined the term enhanced interrogation in German in 1937, and the CIA decided that they liked that quite a bit. And it's definitely not the only thing that they've taken from the Nazi playbook. Some of the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques include, but are not limited to, again, viewer discretion is advised, beating, waterboarding, binding prisoners in distressing positions, placing a hood over the head for days on end, exposure to noise at extremely damaging decibel levels, sleep disturbance, sleep deprivation to the point of hallucination, sensory deprivation, isolation, compression, being smeared in human excrement, deprivation of food, water, and medical treatment for wounds, the R word, subjugation to extreme heat and cold, confinement to small coffin-like boxes, anal feeding, and worst of all, tickle torture. Seriously, that was on the list. It's basically exactly what it sounds like. You just tie somebody up and tickle them for so long that they rat out their entire family. Which, honestly, if you think about it, does sound pretty horrific. And that is seriously not even close to the exhaustive list of creative ways that they have found to exact human misery on these people. It's truly disgusting. It's not known exactly how many have died at the hands of the CIA as a result of these techniques, but the number is thought to be in the low hundreds. In 2005, the CIA intentionally destroyed 92 videotapes which depicted enhanced interrogation techniques being used against Abu Zubaydah, who, as you can see, only has one eye. I wonder how that might have happened. I bet that's totally unrelated. An internal memo from the CIA about the tapes justified their destruction by saying that their contents were so horrific that they would be, quote, devastating to the CIA, and the heat from destroying them is nothing compared to what it would be if the tapes ever made it into public domain. Which, wow. That is the most blatant obstruction of justice I have ever heard. Back to the black sites themselves, my favorite story. Well, it feels kind of weird to call it my favorite story because it's incredibly fucked up and tragic, but the most ridiculous story I came across was that of a man named Khalid El-Masri. El-Masri was a German citizen who was kidnapped by the CIA in 2004 while he was visiting Macedonia, hooded, stripped, shackled, had terrible things done to his butt, and was then drugged unconscious via suppository. And about the terrible things done to his butt that I can't say on YouTube, they did that a lot. They do that a lot. It's really weird. You know that scene in GTA where they're, like, about to do that to somebody? They do that. They do that a lot. Like a really unnecessary amount. El-Masri was then put in a diaper and a jumpsuit and flown to the Salt Pit, a notorious CIA black site in Afghanistan, where he was then starved and tortured for months. Wow, you say, what harsh treatment. This guy must have been a terrible criminal, an absolute abomination if the CIA was willing to do this kind of medieval bullshit to him. Well. You may be surprised. The reason Khalid El-Masri was abducted and tortured for months was because the Macedonian police officer who stopped him at the border, initially detained him and reported him to the CIA, made the teeny tiny mistake of accidentally thinking that he was Khalid Al-Masri with an A instead of an E, who was a known terror suspect. After months of being falsely imprisoned and tortured, El-Masri was eventually hooded and released in a remote desert in the middle of Albania, more than 1,200 miles from his home country of Germany. Khalid has tried to take his case to the Supreme Court multiple times, but has been denied on the basis that the proceedings could not move forward without exposing state secrets. And it would probably expose the secret that the state falsely imprisons and tortures people because some Macedonian dude doesn't know his ABCs. Fun, happy time iceberg list. Watergate. The The Watergate scandal refers to then-President Richard Nixon's attempt to cover up his involvement with a break-in at the Democratic National Committee's offices at the Watergate Hotel and office buildings on June 17, 1972. Nixon was basically trying to spy on the competition during his re-election campaign and was being pretty damn stupid about it. I mean, he wiretapped and recorded like literally everything, which included him planning to do all the illegal wiretapping and a bunch of other illegal shit. He was just wilding all over the place. Anyway, the reason this is on this iceberg is because it was found out that the CIA paid off one of the 5 burglars who broke into the hotel, so they were involved, even though they initially said that they weren't involved with Watergate at all. And that's about it. A decent amount of the entries on here are going to be kind of short like this because they basically just boil down to sketchy thing happens, the CIA says, we have nothing to do with that sketchy thing, and it turns out that they had everything to do with that sketchy thing. HT Lingual. HT Lingual was the code name for the CIA's mail opening operations.
You've got mail.
That's right, mail. Oh, scary. Oh God, not my postage. Definitely the most bone-chilling entry on this iceberg. Between 1952 and 1973, the CIA was systematically opening and photographing any mail that went in or out of Soviet countries and China, and this eventually progressed to them opening and spying on the mail of American citizens, particularly those involved in the civil rights movement. Some examples of those unfortunate souls that had their mail diddled include Martin Luther King, Edward Albee, Bobby Fischer, Linus Pauling, John Steinbeck, and Hubert Humphrey. So watch your mail, kiddos. You know, if the CIA isn't grubbing their little fingies in it, I'm sure Jeff Bezos is plotting something in that shiny little head of his. Black budget. The black budget is how much the government spends per year on secret black projects and black operations. Basically anything that would have one of those little black bars covering it up, that's what the black budget's paying for. Man, the CIA sure does love its black stuff. I mean, what are they, goth? I mean, jeez. A second, more insidious meaning for the black budget, however, is not how much they spend on secret operations, but how much they make from secret and illegal sources, which gets funneled back into their budget, or into their pockets. Think of where they put all the money from that crack they're slanging. You know, it goes in a black budget. Contras. Speaking of crack, let's talk about the Contras. Pretty much as soon as Ronald Reagan was elected into office, he started pursuing his lifelong dream of ruining the American economy. Well, yeah, he did that too, but the dream that's relevant in this situation was his dream to absolutely demolish anything and anyone who could even remotely be described as communist. One of the many, many ways he went about doing this was getting the CIA to fund a right-wing militant resistance group called the Contras, who were fighting the communist government of Nicaragua.
In the 80s there was Cold War drama. We fought the commies inside Nicaragua. Our friends were the Contras. Freedom was their mantra, so we sent them lots of money for guns and landmines.
The CIA supplied the funds, the weapons, the equipment, coordinated training programs, provided intelligence and target lists, and they also supplied the Contras with guerrilla warfare training manuals, which advised that they incite mob violence, neutralize civilian leaders and government officials, engage in public executions, and attack soft targets, including schools, hospitals, and civilian cooperatives. And my question is, what do guerrillas have anything to do with this? I feel like they would never attack hospitals or engage in public executions. They're too busy eating bananas and such. I could see them maybe inciting some mob violence, but only from like throwing poop and stuff, you know? Leave the guerrillas out of this, okay? Coco was my hero. Long live Harambe. The CIA also more directly helped the Contras by blowing up important public infrastructure, including pipelines, oil refineries, and mining ports. How generous of them. Wow. What extraordinarily nice fellows. The CIA was very aware that the Contras were routinely murdering civilians, co-op leaders, nurses, doctors, and judges, and did nothing about it, you know? I mean, they're the ones that told them to do it. Gold star, far-right Nicaraguan rebels. Keep on killing those poor innocent commies. Better dead than red, that's what the Gipper always says. A CIA official told a reporter about the situation that sometimes terror is very productive. This is the policy, to keep putting pressure until the people cry uncle. And they were sure sticking to that policy. They were giving that country one heck of a purple nurple, let me tell you what. A group known as the Human Rights Watch accused the Contras of committing many atrocities, including targeting healthcare clinics and healthcare workers for assassination, kidnapping civilians, torturing civilians, executing civilians, including children who were captured in combat, R-wording women, indiscriminately attacking civilians in civilian houses, seizing civilian property, and burning civilian homes in captured towns. And again, the CIA, totally on board with this. They're doing what they told them. Edgar Chamorro, a former leader of the Contras, said that they were told by the CIA the only way to defeat the Sandinistas was to kill, kidnap, rob, and torture. Real stand-up fellas, a respectable agency. There's also a whole bit about the Contras being funded through cocaine smuggling and the CIA aiding and abetting in that, but we will get to that in Tier 2. Okay, so something to look forward to there. Another controversy surrounding this whole shit show was something eventually referred to as the Iran-Contra affair. Wait, what? Iran? How'd Iran get in there, you wonder? Well, I'm about to fucking tell you, dude. Chill out. You have, like, no patience, huh? So even though the Contras were great at murdering civilians and committing war crimes, they weren't very good at, being a military. They'd lose pretty much every fight against the actual Sandinista army, and they were basically just picking on the little guy because they couldn't take on someone their own size. Because of this, the American public was like, okay, why are we giving these guys millions of dollars of aid and weapons if they fucking suck? Can we not be doing that, maybe? So Congress decided to make it illegal for the government to continue sending aid to the Contras themselves.
But Congress stopped the Contra money flow just cause they moved a teeny bit of blow.
But Reagan and the CIA weren't going to do a silly little thing like listen to the American public, obey the law, and not commit high treason. That would be ridiculous.
Their requests are highly irregular, most likely illegal if the press gets a hold.
What the hell are you talking about? You know who we are?
Every mission we go on is illegal.
So Reagan got his old pal to find a way to secretly raise the funds and get it into the Contras' hands anyway.
He and Reagan went around the sissy Congress.
Ollie North raised the money by selling weapons to Iran, an act which would totally never backfire by arming Al-Qaeda and arguably starting the war on terror or anything like that. And he took this money from Iran and gave it to the Contras, hence Iran-Contra.
You see, North secretly sold missiles to a harmless country called Iran that would always be a grateful ally. Then he gave the profits to the Contras. Genius!
There's your history lesson for the day.
Crap, that's the end.
Fake Pakistani, vaxismos. I don't quite want to say that word on YouTube, because even though it's been like 2 or 3 years at this point, and it's a, standard medical procedure that saves lives, they still don't really like you saying the word. I don't get it. Also, I got a haircut in between recording sessions. Don't freak out. It's going to be okay. My hair is shorter. Fuck. Anyway, so the CIA's fake Pakistani Vaxismo program was basically an operation to steal unwitting people's DNA to try and find Osama bin Laden. I know, that's a lot. That sounds like something Alex Jones would mutter in his sleep while he's dreaming about gay frogs.
I'm kind of retarded.
But it's very real, and I'll break it down for you. So in the early 2010s, the US was closing in on their search for bin Laden, and they had narrowed down his possible location to one specific compound in Pakistan. However, they wanted to be 100% certain that that was in fact the place before they bust in their guns a-blazing, and in typical CIA fashion, they developed a ridiculous, needlessly intricate Rube Goldberg machine of a plan in order to do so. They paid off a doctor to start the fake Pakistani Vaxismo program, which would start in the poorest part of the area to make it more believable that they were just handing out free Vaxismos, and would slowly move its way closer to the bin Laden compound in a much wealthier part of town, all with the purpose of extracting DNA from these people getting vaccinated. The thinking was that bin Laden was hiding with his large family in that compound, and that eventually one of his relatives would want to get a free Vaxismo for some reason, and they would then analyze all the DNA they had collected and compare it against the DNA they had already collected from bin Laden's sister who had died in Boston in 2010. This plan, as would be expected, probably didn't work at all, but they ended up getting the guy anyway, so I guess we'll never really know. Google. Ah, good old Goog. She pays my bills. Just kidding, not really. None of my stuff gets monetized. And that's because I strive to bring you guys the raw, real shit that the man does not want you to hear, and that advertisers apparently do not want to pay for either. And if you would like me to keep being able to bring you such raw, real shit, it would be great if you could support me on Patreon. Link in the description. Just a couple bucks. It really makes my day. When I see that somebody signed up, I coom. I coom all day long. Help me coom. Is that helping, or is that making you want to do it less? Either way, please do it. Please support me. It really helps out a lot. I'm very poor, and the CIA is probably going to put me on that disposition matrix pretty soon, so I need money and fast. I need to get out of the country like yesterday. Okay, back to Google. By the mid-1990s, the CIA and NSA had started to notice this totally radical hip new jam called the internet and thought to themselves, a place where everything everyone says, does, or whacks off to is recorded and stored with data that could be accessed by someone behind the scenes. Does that sound like useful to anyone? Is there anyone that might profit from a massive amount of stored data from an international information superhighway growing faster than anything has ever grown ever? Like maybe some sort of agency of some kind? And then the CIA and NSA locked eyes and started passionately making out and doing hand stuff under the table because they realized that they were both, in fact, that agency. They decided to take advantage of this amazing opportunity with what scientists today are referring to as money. They started investing millions of dollars into Silicon Valley startups because typically when somebody gives you millions of dollars, you are inclined to let them use the shit that you made with said millions of dollars to, invade the privacy of, let's say, literally everyone on the planet, maybe? Theoretically speaking. Some of these millions ended up in the hands of two fine fellows who should pay me more, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, co-founders of this little thing called Grindr. Google. They invented Google. They both start with a G. I get confused sometimes. I'll feel like enjoying some wildlife from time to time and type big furry bears into one and get very different results. Google has actively denied being funded by the CIA in the past, but now it's all public record, baby. It's out there. So what are they hiding? Why do they feel the need to lie to us? Huh? Google? What's up, Googs? What's going on here, Googs? Radio Free Asia. Radio Free Asia was a CIA-run, San Francisco-based radio station in the 50s, created with the purpose of broadcasting covert propaganda throughout Asia in multiple languages. And, like most things the CIA did at the time, it was intended to screw the commies. It's still a thing today, Radio Free Asia is, but I don't think it's... To our knowledge, publicly, it is no longer run by the CIA. But, are we really going to trust them? Are we? I guess. Hollywood influence. The CIA's Hollywood influence is something that I would not have expected at first, but makes a lot of sense once you start thinking about it. The CIA loves to manipulate the media, get in the pockets of journalists, spread propaganda, and what better way to spread propaganda nowadays than movies and television? Well, I guess the internet, probably. But what better way 10 years ago to spread covert propaganda than movies and television? And they're surprisingly open about the fact that they do this. In 1996, under the Clinton administration, the CIA started publicly assigning agents to work with Hollywood studios and production companies with the goal of, quote, upgrading its image. Some productions confirmed to have ties to the CIA are films in the Tom Clancy series, including Clear and Present Danger, The Sum of All Fears, and Patriot Games. Other films, including Argo, Zero Dark 30, and The Hurt Locker, and some television series, including Alias, Homeland, and 24. And if you like any of those, turns out you like CIA propaganda. So, sorry there, bud. Don't know what to tell you. Hurt Locker is pretty damn good, though. The CIA sure can make that propaganda entertaining, I'll tell you what. Civil Air Transport. So Civil Air Transport was really just Air America before it was called Air America. In the first entry, we talked about that CIA-owned fleet of planes that transported drugs around Laos called Air America. Well, Civil Air Transport was originally owned by China, and when the CIA bought it, they kept the name and moniker for a little bit while they ran some missions in China, Korea, and Vietnam, and then retooled and renamed it into Air America. That's about it. Extraordinary renditions. Alright, I already covered these super happy fun time things a little bit as well, so this one's gonna be short too. As previously mentioned, extraordinary rendition is just CIA speak for government-sponsored kidnapping, and it's how the CIA gets a person from one country to another without going through the proper legal channels. And this is usually done for the purpose of taking somebody to a black site to perform some enhanced interrogation. You got black sites, enhanced interrogation, and extraordinary rendition. They're like the little love triangle of disgusting nonsense. It all wraps up in a pretty little blood-soaked bow, doesn't it? Radio Free Europe. Radio Free Europe was basically Radio Free Asia, but for Europe. Who would have possibly guessed that? I was flabbergasted when I learned that information. Radio Free Europe was founded first and was the same basic situation, except ran in New York on the East Coast instead of San Francisco on the West Coast, and the CIA used it to broadcast covert propaganda into Europe instead of Asia. I assume more cheese and wine-based broadcasts, and like free healthcare, I guess. I don't know anything about Europe. What do they do over there? All I know is British people aren't real, and that is the extent of my knowledge. National Student Association. The National Student Association, also known as the NSA, a funny title given the context of the video, was an organization of student governments in colleges and universities that accepted funding from the CIA between the early 50s and 1967. Since these were student governments, it would stand to assume that at least several of these students would eventually make it into big boy politics and the actual government, and I think the CIA was funding the group to try and sway these kids into a more CIA-friendly slant when they got into actual political office. Project Mockingbird. This is not to be confused with Operation Mockingbird, which is apparently more well-known, because every time I look for Project Mockingbird, it redirects me over there, and why is this in the first tier? If Operation Mockingbird is more well-known, I can't handle it, I'm gonna explode. Project Mockingbird was a CIA-run wiretapping operation ordered by President Kennedy in 1963. Secretly recorded tape from the Oval Office was released in 2001 because that's like what these guys did in that era for some reason. They would just record everything in their Oval Office and just forget to turn it off when they were talking about the illegal shit. I mean, come on. That's got to be like rule number 1 in the corrupt politician's guide to effectively being a scumbag. I'd definitely buy that book, by the way. Feel free to use that title, writers of the audience. The tape caught Kennedy ordering the CIA to spy on one Hanson Baldwin, the national security reporter for the New York Times at the time. At the New York Times. You see, Baldwin, much like his cousin Alec, made some questionable decisions and ended up pissing off the Prez pretty bad. And if there's one thing you don't want to do, it's piss off a Kennedy. Well, actually, I mean, I guess if you just run the clock out, you're fine, as long as they don't assassinate you before they inevitably get assassinated themselves. Those guys just cannot dodge a bullet, magical or otherwise. Baldwin published an article which exposed classified information, including a comparison between the US and Soviet Union's nuclear arsenals at the time, and also some of the Soviets' efforts to protect their missile sites. I don't know the specifics of the numbers released, but since Kennedy got so steamed over it, I assume that this nuclear dick measuring contest did not go in America's favor. Probably made us look shriveled, chode-like even. You can't stand for that. I mean, you could blame it on shrinkage. I mean, it is a Cold War, but still. So to prevent his nation from further embarrassing nuclear chodery, Kennedy decided to wiretap this journalist, and after he did that, he was like, why stop there? You know, there's other journalists out there trying to shame America's metaphorical wiener. Let's tap them too. They ended up committing illegal warrantless wiretaps on 3 separate journalists, but from my understanding, they didn't really get anything out of it. They just did illegal stuff for no good reason. How unlike the CIA. Weird. The knowledge of Project Mockingbird came to the public in 2007 with the release of a beautiful document that was basically just a 702-page kick in the nuts to the CIA, which was appropriately titled The Family Jewels. And the Family Jewels is not even on this iceberg, because as big and monstrous as it is in size, this iceberg is still, I'm sure, just the tip of the iceberg. The CIA is so fucked up, and there's so much stuff that they've done that we just don't know, and will probably never know, so I'm sure this iceberg is probably just maybe 10% of their illegal nonsense that by some grace of God has made it into the public knowledge. The Family Jewels is a set of documents detailing many illegal, inappropriate, and otherwise shade-alicious things the CIA did between 1959 and 1973, which was just prime fucking around years for them. They were going crazy. The CIA director who received the reports described them as the skeletons in the CIA's closet, and they actually exposed quite a bit, including some of the stuff we've already discussed. Some of the more notable CIA no-nos exposed in this document include Project Mockingbird, obviously, I just said that, keep up dude, multiple CIA-backed break-ins of former CIA employees and defectors, HT Lingual, the mail-grubbing operation we discussed earlier, the CIA's LSD-based mind control operation known as MK-Ultra, which we will discuss in the next tier, many of the assassination attempts against Fidel Castro, as well as against the leader of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the president of the Dominican Republic, and the commander-in-chief of the Chilean army. I guess Castro wasn't the only one these guys just cannot kill. There's also the mass surveillance of the hippies between 1967 and 1971, basically just the surveilling of anti-Vietnam activists, civil rights people, and everybody else that Mr. Government hated at the time, which was a lot of people. And finally, this one makes me happy because it's phrased funny. Apparently, the document exposed the CIA's, quote, surveillance of one particular Latin American female and of U.S. citizens in Detroit. And to me, that just sounds like some creepy agent had a crush on one particular spicy Latina Detroiter. I had to look up what people from Detroit are called for that, and it is Detroiter, which is somehow the worst possible option they could have chosen. Detroitian is better than that. Detroitonian. Detroitonite. There's so many options. Bay of Pigs invasion. The Bay of Pigs invasion, despite popular belief, actually involved no pigs. It instead involved 1,500 Cuban exiles who attempted to overthrow Castro's communist government. And you know, when the words overthrow and communist are in the same sentence, you better get a mop to wipe up all the drool coming from the mouth of the CIA, okay? That somebody might slip. After Castro's men overthrew the Batista government, run by former dictator of Cuba, Fulgencio Batista, hundreds of thousands of Batista supporters and enemies of the revolution fled or were exiled to the United States from Cuba. Some of them formed their own revolutionary group within the U.S. called Brigade 2506. I do not know what happened to the other 2,505 brigades, but that's not important right now, okay? Since these militant Cuban exiles in the U.S. had a common enemy, the communist Cubanos, the CIA was more than happy to fund the brigade, supply them with U.S. personnel, and train them in Guatemala. On April 15, 1961, 8 CIA-flown B-26 planes bombed Cuban airfields in preparation for the invasion, and 2 days later, the 1,500 Cuban exiles parachuted and sailed tanks into the southern coast of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs. This did not go well at all. The Cuban exiles were completely defeated in less than 3 days. The whole invasion is considered one of the worst foreign policy failures in U.S. history, and it directly led to the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, which was pretty much the closest the world has ever been to all-out nuclear war. Not a very fun time, generally speaking. Unless you're a fan of all-out nuclear war, in which case, sorry to disappoint you, bud. Play some more Fallout and hope Trump gets reelected. He'll probably give you another chance. Congress for Cultural Freedom. The Congress for Cultural Freedom was a CIA-backed propaganda group founded in West Germany in 1950, which, and this is shocking, did not care for communists very much. And the CIA was actually set up directly after World War II specifically to go against the USSR's intelligence operations. So it's really no surprise that so much of their nonsense was directed toward the commies, especially at this time. At its height, the CCF had offices in more than 35 different countries and was noted to be one of the most effective anti-communist propaganda measures that the CIA engaged in. Apparently, they can do something right. Wow. Whoa. What? Even though, they kinda didn't. You see, the CCF is controversial because the CIA once again funded them indirectly through, quote, dummy fronts like the U.S. State Department and the United States Information Agency, and then denied their involvement completely like the dirty little liars they are. Those little scamps just can't stop fibbing, bro. It's an addiction. Crypto AG. Crypto AG is, despite the name, not the next hot new shitcoin set to chart its way to the moon, but was instead a Swiss company founded in 1950 that was secretly purchased by the CIA and West Germans in 1970. The company created encryption machines and other cipher devices, think Alan Turing, and the US used it as a critical component of their Operation Thesaurus, a joint CIA and West German operation designed to break the encryption codes of other countries. The countries affected by this operation include this long-ass list right here. 120 countries total, plus the United Nations. How many countries are there? How many countries are there? 195? There is only 195! What? There are only 195 countries that exist today, and I think back then there was at least a few less, so that's most of them. I can't do math, I don't know the fraction, but they spied on most of them, and the United Nations. The most effective method that they used this company for in Operation Thesaurus, which was pretty darn nifty, in my humble opinion, was that since nobody knew that the company was secretly owned by the CIA, Crypto AG would sell all of their encryption devices with a secret back door, or a secret way for the CIA to basically know exactly what the countries were trying to say in their encrypted messages. So these countries would spend massive amounts of time, energy, and money trying to come up with these incredibly complex ways to encrypt their messages, just for the CIA to be like, yep, they just said we suck. I knew it. Let's nuke them. Whoa, Gary, dude, that's intense. Can we just, overthrow their democratically elected government or something? How about we do both? Okay, yeah, I could get on board with that. Okay, that's it for Tier 1. Please support me on Patreon if you can. I make no money, and it really makes my day. And stay tuned for Tier 2. Or, if it's out already, then here it is. Click it. Click it right now. What are you doing? What are you waiting for? It's right here. Click it. Dude, why haven't you clicked it already?
Somebody once told me